All right. I'm launching a YouTube. You can jump in with the tech.
YouTube channel.
YouTube channel. Its focus is both prophetic and evangelical. Can I say that?
Yeah, sure.
And but the baseline of everything I want to put on this site, I want it to come out of the friendship that I believe my journey has been about in my relationship to Yehoshua HaMashiach.
So what's the channel called then?
Friendship with Yehoshua? Is it? You're funny. Because see, that's kind of how my mind works. The technical, that's why I love Ben. He keeps the technical, the detail, and I'm thinking more of what it's about than what the label is about.
Yeah.
But it's important for me to keep in mind it's friendship with Yehoshua.
But what we found, the name that we found, what the channel is named, is Friend of Yehoshua.
Yeah, Friend of Yehoshua.
But it takes friendship with Yehoshua to be a friend of Yehoshua, but Yehoshua definitely extends that friendship, the hand of that friendship, to everyone.
It does. And as a believer in who our Messiah is, in the death and resurrection, in his life on earth as a prophet, as a rabbi, as a high priest, and as the Passover lamb, in the context of understanding that, even in the relationship he had with his original friends, his community, there was always a friendship mindset. And so I want us to redefine in our state, cultural state, in the generation of what was one of the names we thought about? Friendship generation.
Yeah, we almost did that one.
We almost did that one, but that to me is limiting, because my journey from the very beginning, and at some point, some of these videos are going to be about story. I want to approach it from, this is my story. Yeah. And in the boundaries of my story, Yeshua is going to be amplified. And one of the first primary revelations, if you will, without being taught by man, came out of John 15. I no longer call you slaves.
I think that's important, because sometimes whenever you say Yehoshua, or what some people would say is the name of Jesus, it puts people in what some people call a ministry mindset. Now, ministry is just a word that should mean service, and service is part of any meaningful relationship. But a lot of people, when they say ministry, they mean 501c3 nonprofits of a religious character, and they think performance-based services, and they think ritual and religious costumes and stuff like that. It's helpful to hear, he's in this passage that you're talking about, he's saying, I no longer call you servants or slaves. I'm not relating to you based on service. It's something different. So what does he call us?
That's important, clarity, because in the context that I read out of John 15, the most important understanding that I believe our Messiah wants to impart to us, it is that I cannot have a relationship with my Creator if I look at him as a master. Because a master, they don't know the relationship end. A master mindset, a servant master mindset. Now keep in mind, some controversies that I've experienced is, well, you have to serve, you have to be a servant. I'm not talking about the verb part, the active part of serving. I'm talking about the servant mentality of a slave who's in bondage to a master who has to obey without reason.
Right, and that's exactly what Jesus says. Yehoshua says.
That's okay.
Yehoshua says, Ron's been encouraging me to use his actual name and not the names that preceded after that, so I apologize. But anyway,
no apology. Thank you.
In saying this, Yehoshua said, for a servant or a slave does not know what his master is doing.
And I think in context of the state of which our Messiah was born into, with the Roman Empire and the state of the nation of Israel, whose God, whose authority was Caesar. We without going to teaching mode, and so I think that the relational part is the major part of the gospel good news message of both the kingdom that he demonstrated and sent his disciples out to demonstrate, which the gospel of the kingdom of heaven and his righteousness, and the gospel of the good news that sets us up to be redeemed in a relationship with the Father, not with a master.
But one of the things that's important, I guess, as I hear you say that, is to realize that recovering this gospel means you're recovering the whole story. Because
Right.
Abraham was called a friend of God. Moses, what was particular about Moses being a prophet is he went and spoke with God as one does his friend, and even in the worst conflicts of his life, God would refer to him as my friend Moses.
And if we understand friendship in that context, and in the context the Messiah was putting out to his original friends, community relationships, we call disciples or taught ones, that word friendship, they would understand it from that perspective. There's an intimacy that Moses was obtaining. And even when Moses prophesied, watch for the prophet that's going to come, going to be like me, and what the Messiah was saying, it's like, I'm telling you these things because I'm showing you not what a king in worldly sense. I'm showing you what the Father's showing me. I'm teaching you what the Father is teaching me. And there was a relationship, which is the primary redemption message in the gospel, is to restore us back to the relationship of Father and Son. And that relationship between the Father and Son has not ever meant to be based on performance, based on a fear master level. And I'm going to interject this quick, because at some point there will be a video on the prodigal son. That there's such a revelation of a relationship that we can define more clearly. And I've made my filter in relating to people. I can have my Father's heart without being a father. Do you hear what I'm saying?
Yeah, I hear you.
Our Messiah had our Father's heart without being the Father. And it clears up some of the misconceptions of even who the Messiah is and his purpose as a prophet, his purpose as a rabbi to teach, his purpose as a shepherd, his purpose as an apostle, in all those areas that we're supposed to be functioning in at some point. And if it's not leading us back to a place of the Father in a way that we can tap in and be like him, because it's the Father who seeks those who worship him in spirit and in truth, that's a personal relational friendship level. And when I begin to understand friendship from that perspective, and not friendship from our Western culture, from our church culture, and what kind of friend are you? Are you a ministry friend? You're only friends when you're working together in a ministry? Are you a family friend because you're related by blood? And that thing. But when I take this revelation and I begin to live it out on a relation and maintain that mindset when I approach every individual, it changes the dynamic of finding the kingdom of Jehovah and his righteousness that I think most of us are seeking. So the purpose of this channel, the purpose of this, and even this launch, I will most likely you'll find videos with more detail than some of the general things that I'm putting out here. You want to say something?
I was going to say that...
Because he's a really good friend when he can cut me off. I say, hey, can I breathe? Can you breathe so I can get a word in?
Well, that's what I want to talk about. You want to talk about breathing, right? Because when we were studying yesterday, we were looking at the Old Testament Hebrew word for friend. Right?
Yes, thank you for bringing that up.
And when it says that Abraham is a friend of God, the root word means to breathe after. It's closer to lover than what we mean friend. Because like I've got 2,500 friends on Facebook. I don't think any of them are breathing after me. There's not a sense of longing to be with. And when we talk about that in kind of our twisted culture, we're like, oh well, I don't want to do that. That's sexual. That's intimate. That's erotic, and I don't want to think of my friends that way. And we're even uncomfortable if God thinks of us that way sometimes, right? But here's this thing about humanity. We've always wanted God in a box in some ways, and this idea that He wants to know us really deeply, and for us to know Him really deeply. Sometimes we're uncomfortable because of the bigness of Him, of what that might entail to know Him on that level. And we're also scared of that with each other, right?
We are, especially in the state of culture and how perverted it's gotten, even in the boundaries of the religious sect. And I use the word Christian lightly because of my journey, and you'll hear some of that story at some point. I think that part of sharing the true Yeshua HaMashiach that I've learned to identify Him as, our stories need to be involved in that, not in a way where I become a poster boy because I was delivered from some dramatic thing, but because of the intimacy that I have with the Messiah. That's what motivated me not to labor in my deliverance, so to speak. I work out my salvation with reverence and trembling because of the state of humanity. And when we're talking about friendship, we're talking about that breath that you put up. And I'm hoping that that I find the grace that the Ruach HaKodesh will give me to go back to that spot that you showed me. That's powerful. That's what I need to get back into. But in the meantime, the dialogue, the reasoning out on these matters, the going after the clarity is coming. But when we talk about that breath thing, the intimacy, that's exactly, if I can be so bold to say this, without all the Strongs and lexicons and all that stuff, that's what Jehovah did in the garden when He breathed in to Adam.
Right.
That's the breath that Yeshua came to bring us to a place that Jehovah gives mercy who He gives mercy to. And now we're at a place that any of us can have and be restored at that depth of friendship that Abraham had, that Moses had, and even Yehoshua, for him to do what he did and to maintain the integrity in his humanity, to be that pure lamb in that human death that he took, to be restored to a high priest that didn't have to do that extra sacrifice to be in the Holy of Holies. It's that breath, that breathing. And so I'm learning to take the limited understanding in the Brit Hadashah in the New Testament regarding the Holy Spirit, the breath, you can't see it. Well, I want to understand it from the garden and this and Abraham and Moses and even the disciples when Yeshua breathed on his 72 that were still committed to him in that year and a half ministry that he walked out before his death, before he was murdered and raised from the dead. That's referencing. And in that...
Right, it is what it's referencing. And sometimes we miss that as he breathed on me, he said, receive now the Spirit. We like to think of Pentecost that happened later as the point of reception of the Spirit. But no, that intimate breathing on them, bringing them peace was when he said, receive now the Spirit.
And I want us to consider this because, give me a second. There is a passage, I think it's Isaiah. It's from the end reveals the beginning.
Okay.
That's in Isaiah. And I'm saying it's important when I walk out my faith in the Messiah that I don't get stuck in the sin mindset, in the gospel of the death and resurrection. The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Yahushua HaMashiach.
Yeah,
and
wait. You're going to have...
ahead?
Well, no. Just you need to unwrap or unfold.
Okay.
Because some people would say, oh, in the New Testament we talk about the gospel of the death and the resurrection. You're not saying necessarily that the death and the resurrection isn't part of the gospel or isn't important to the gospel. What you're saying is that people have a sin consciousness. They think of themselves as a sinner first. The mere fact of believing in that way, thinking of themselves in that way, puts them in a different mind that when then they view the gospel, the death and the resurrection becomes a transaction, like something that happens at a supermarket. Is it?
Yes, I think that's a clearer way to define that. And again, as I launch this first video, that's going to be an area that I'm going to put out there and say, hey, what do you think about this, people? This is where I'm at in my story, in my journey, and this is what man's not teaching me these things. The Ruach Hakodesh, the Torah, the instructions are affirming what I'm feeling, affirming what revelation I think I'm getting, and preventing me from creating false doctrines of man, and not allowing me to when I minister, one of the most vital parts of the good news is the blood of the Lamb, the foreshadow of the system from the beginning of the mountain, and be able to take us back. The whole blood of the Lamb thing was there when that's what Isaac and Abraham was about. That's what Cain and Abel were all about. That was an ongoing thing since the garden. Now, without going into all the proof of that, there's a level of faith and trustworthiness and revelation that I've walked out, but it comes out of the intimacy that I want to maintain in my faith walk, and when I relate to people, and it is my gauge of discernment. It's a concrete gauge of discernment. If somebody's relating to me and they're not connecting with me, well, we're not walking in that intimacy that I think we're supposed to do, that the Messiah did. I'm not here to be a good teacher. I want to be. I'm not here to be a exact, precise, true prophet of Jehovah. I want to be when it's activated. Or all those are the trimmings, and I want the power of those to come out of the intimacy that we're supposed to have when we're sharing these things. And so there's so many references even in the Gospels, the Good Samaritan, I don't want to be that kind of rabbi or that kind of scribe. I want to be that Good Samaritan that he was treating that man along the side of the road as though he was his family member.
Right.
That's what friendship is. That's why Rahab and Ruth, and I can only think of them right now, or even the Canaanite woman in the Gospels and the Centurion guard, they were approaching the Messiah on that level of intimacy. Without that intimacy, their faith is empty and hollow. Your faith, to the Canaanite woman, there was a vulnerability and an intimacy that Joshua was demonstrating, because the disciples sent her away. It's like, well, no. If I'm walking out my story of redemption, I want it to be in a way that doesn't matter what lifestyle you've lived. You're going to see our Messiah. You're going to want to be in relationship with men like me in a way that shakes up and restores. And we all have a measure of faith. We all have to work out our faith before our Father, and this idea of friendship, in my conviction, needs to be redefined, biblically redefined, in a way that takes it into there's only one kind of friend. I could get all trapped in, okay, he's my friend because I'm going for coffee with him, or he can come and mow my lawn, or I'm in ministry. Well, as soon as that ministry's over, the friendship's over. That's not the friendship Yehoshua was talking about.
Right, that reduces people into human doings, not human beings.
Right, and in light of that, that's where the confusion of not saved by works come in, where we don't focus on the works, have to balance out the deeds and the works and the instructions. How can I say I love Jehovah when I don't keep his commandments? How can I say I love you if I'm not finding what you need in the boundaries of how I love Jehovah?
Right.
And so I think that in launching this, it's been a long time. Decades. I've had different cycles in my journey, and my own fears, my own brokenness, if you will, and my own desire to walk in true friendship with people. Some of you can say, hey, yeah, I have a friend, I haven't seen him for 6 months, and since we connect, it's like we never departed. Well, that's good. I'm happy for you. I have friends like that too. But in the context of the kingdom of Jehovah and its righteousness, even that needs to come up another step. Mm-hmm. Even that needs to come up, because when you're not there in those 6 months that I don't see you, if I'm walking in the Spirit, guess what? You're going to hear from me. as my friend. You know, remember how Yehoshua healed, I think it was a rabbi's daughter who was sick, or somebody was sick and he didn't even have to go. It's like, okay, go, and he was healed. It's in that mindset of friendship. That happened because of that. And so in my conviction. And so as we continue building this, I do have on this site my email address. I would love for people to comment and to put their input. And I want it to, the baseline, I want it to be a story baseline. And at different points, you're going to see me, this is the passage, this is the reference, this, and do the blue line, what is it called?
Blue letter Bible?
Yeah, see, I know what blue letter Bible is, remembering what it is and telling you that's where he comes in. So, but in essence, it's got to stay in the storyline level, because when Yeshua told his disciples, I no longer call you slaves, because a slave does not know the heart, does not know the mind, does not know the master's moving and going. There's a fear element involved. That's sin consciousness.
Right.
But when he said, I call you friends, I want us to understand when he said, I think it might say, I now call you friends, or I call you friends. He was walking like that from the beginning.
Well, I think that there are several of the passages that the way that they render that is, see, I have called you friends.
That's important to make sure that clarity is there, because I don't want us to think, and I don't want to think that I can't have a friendship relationship with Jehovah or with Yeshua. My relationship with Jehovah is the end result of my relationship with Yeshua. And in context, because he says, I'm your friend because I'm showing you what my Father's showing me. I'm teaching you what my Father's teaching me. And it's that kind of relationship that brings us and will bring us into a maturity that launched the Messiah in that place. Now we're betrothed to him, that when he returns, we'll be ready for that next level of intimacy when a married couple comes together after their engagement. There's a whole other thing on that.
Yeah, there's a whole other thing.
I want to be careful. I don't want to get too much.
I feel like we probably ought to move towards wrap up, but I want to point or bring up a couple of things. One is, you had said as we started recording earlier that you wanted to move in thankfulness. So I want to keep in the spirit of that and talk about how thankful I have been for our friendship. Specifically because I was praying some very specific things in my life that you were an answer to. And I was praying, I had reached a point in my collaboration with people, in my journey with people, in my walk with people, you could really say in my friendship with people, there was like a wall on intimacy. And at the same time I was praying because I felt like God was speaking to me everywhere about covenant, and I didn't understand covenant. So these were my two prayers, as I kept crashing this wall in intimacy, and at the same time God was saying covenant. So one of the things that people are going to encounter in your channel are, they might ask the question, why do you say Yehoshua? Why do you say Jehovah? Why are there Hebrew words on it? And a big part of you is the idea of covenant as part of this friendship and this idea of intimacy.
Yes. And as you mentioned that, I do have another channel. It's called Ron Lee, and I have a couple short videos regarding covenant. And I think that the word covenant and that concept, since our Messiah came to restore a covenant, broken covenant on that intimate level, I can't walk out a covenant without the friendship. I can't.
But on the other hand,
I can't walk out that covenant on an intimacy level.
But is it even a friendship if you're unwilling to have the covenant?
That's a good question. I almost answered that without thinking. I do that sometimes.
Well, I mean that's part of, like, in my marriage, in my parenthood, in my friendship. If if they are not open in the relationship to me saying, okay, this is who I am, this is what I want life to look like, and they're like, I don't care about any of that, I only want what I want, then I feel like that limits our friendship. And then when I realize I'm doing that with God, and God's saying to me, this is what I would want life to look like, and then I put up well, God, that's too hard. God, I'm not really interested. God, I've got reasons why I don't want to hear you on that. Then I realize that covenant is part of this. It's not necessarily when the disciples first were curious about Yehoshua, he didn't say these are the terms of service. He didn't turn around and say, these are going to be the terms of the service and the rules if you want to be friends. He said, come and see. Come and see. Let's hang out. Let's do life together. But as they did life together, he's like, I want to share with you what my Father's doing. I want to share with you his way. And that's what moved them from servants of God who feel like they're outside the house to friends of God who feel like they're heirs of the kingdom.
Right. I connect with how you're articulating that. And in that light, if you will, it's crucial, because when I'm saying, well, I have more people than what I prefer do this.
Right. And I did a little bit, like when we first met, the prophetic energy, I'm learning the prophetic energy. I'm really trying to learn to respect it. But the prophetic energy, at first I was like, whoo.
And I am a rare male. I'm an emotional, feely, touchy. My MQ for emotions are off the charts when it comes to it's the senses that we need, and to have to learn over the decades to harness that, to keep in that intimacy before the Father, to not to pervert, or even do this. I can honestly sit here. I might feel the pain of this, not me doing it, but on the flip side of that, as long as I maintain that image of what Yehoshua was saying as friend, in the context, there is a friend that sticks closer to me than a brother, and Proverbs kind of clarifies that a little bit on what I'm doing now, so I want to be careful I don't add or take away from that. But the point of that is, which I believe when he told that to his original disciples, they already had access to that principle of a friend that sticks closer to a brother. That was the Good Samaritan. He was a friend that sticks closer to a brother, because as a brother, I need to be walking with that heart of intimacy that my Father walks in.
And you do a lot with what people generally call the story of the prodigal son, which ought to be the story of the Father's heart.
It is, and I do have a mini series or a little breakdown of that. I've had that for decades, and I got to share it at different points. But to me, again, once some of you get to know my story, you'll understand my passion and my revelation regarding the prodigal son, and that's the heart I want to walk in, and I can't have that without breaking away from looking at Dad in the boundaries, even on the natural, as my master, and I better obey him. I'm going to get smacked across the face or put in a corner.
And that's how the prodigal came back. He said, listen, I'm not even worthy to be called your son. Just call me a slave. At least the slaves eat in your house.
Right.
But the father was not willing to identify him that way.
And so it's in the beginning, I mean, I'm 66 years old. I met Yehoshua in a non-believing home when I was in the second grade. And so I've had a lot of journey and a lot of mistakes, a lot of falling and getting up again, as righteous men do. That's why I'm very strong and maybe even appearing defensive when I'm around men who want to stay sin conscious. Because if I'm sin conscious, then I'm not walking in the gospel kingdom, or I'm not walking in the full understanding what the death and resurrection was meant to be. So
right, and there's a lot of this in our culture where we say, "Oh, that person's a saint." You can even say that in a derogatory way. Oh, they think they're such a saint.
Well, yeah, I get that a lot. No,
But then
I'm not a saint.
But well, you are actually. That's the thing,
I-
is that in the Catholic system, the saints were these people so high above us who had achieved like a level of spirituality that the rest of us can only dream about. But then when you read the New Testament, the holy ones are us.
They are, and I'm sorry. This is a little like pet peeve for me. I don't like using the word saint. It's a Catholic thing,
Yeah.
and it's actually what creates the idolatry of these men that they elevated.
But doesn't the word that the Latin says is Santos, where we get saint, isn't it actually holy ones?
It is. It's set apart one. And in order for me to achieve that or walk in that, I have to understand how the Torah fits into that. A righteous man, falls sometimes and gets up at something. Look at who King David was.
Yeah.
So there's all.
he had some things.
He did,
Issues.
but if as we begin to wrap this up, I want to make sure the end reveals the beginning, because it's a secular cycle, and the beginning for us is the garden.
Oh yeah.
Okay, and that's the goal from the beginning up to the time Yahushua finally came onto the scene to when he returns, is we are caught. And even in, there is that tree of life that it's the literal tree of life that we can have. There's something about that's needs to unfold. But as I start this out with John 15:15, being a friend with Yahushua, that has been my savior. That revelation, that principle and precept of relationship, it's hindered some because not everybody's there. And within my emotional realm, my feeling realm, I'm not here to make you feel good. I'd love to make you feel good, but not if it's going to compromise the personal relationship that we're supposed to have with Yahushua. And if I can't have that with him by hearing the teachings that he's passed on to us from the Father, and remember, Moses said, this is who you look for. Someone greater than Moses, and who is a prophet, first a prophet, is to restore us back to the covenant, restore us back. What are the conditions of the covenant? So we'll get into that again. But as we end, I want to end with the prodigal son story, because it's that story that Yeshua can portray if we know how. If I'm humble enough to look at that and make it about the Father's heart, not about the two sons. Because the two sons had one thing in common. They did not know their father intimately. Because the prodigal son that went out wanted to find his own way. Can you imagine? But when he came back and he awakened to his senses, and remember, Yeshua said the prostitutes, the tax collectors, the pagans, the sinner, those that are major transgressors, are going to enter the kingdom of Jehovah and his righteousness first, because those are the main defaults, the main stumbling blocks. And so he awakened first, because here he is in the most vile place that a Hebrew can be, in a pig pen, eating pig food. And so he was already awakened to one of Jehovah's laws regarding the food laws. And realizing that even that alone, he saw his father as a master. That might even been what made him want to leave. The taskmaster that he was. I didn't want to spoil my children when they want to take my money and run. The inheritance that we're supposed to be giving our children or our grandchildren. And so, but when he awakened and came back, I'm not going to go at all the details, but there is at least 10 or more attributes of the Father's heart, and a stage, a progression to get him to the place where he comes into the community, and then those in that community addressing his brother primarily, and in the Jewish culture, in the Hebrew culture, the conflict that Judah is going to have with brother Ephraim and all that is they're out in the world, and now they want the inheritance. They want to be restored. Well, the second portion is that. And so we can go back, and I encourage you to do this on your own. I will get that portion out at some point. The prodigal son story is very much part of understanding John 15:15, because the purpose of Yahushua is to restore us to that intimacy with the Father, And that's why the Father said, nobody comes to the Son but by me, because I want you to be in relationship with me, and this particular Son is going to show you how to do that. And so, but all the way from the physical intimacy, the first thing that the Father did was touch his Son.
Yeah. Well, actually, and this is I love this because the name of your channel is Friend of Yehoshua, and the name Yehoshua is God Saves.
Is Jehovah.
Jehovah saves. See, I'm still getting
Jehovah's delivered. No, that's all right.
Yeah, Jehovah saves, right?
Yeah.
And it says that the first thing the Father did was ran towards him.
Yes. Thank you for correcting that, bringing that in alignment, because that's as my heart.
Right.
If I'm going to walk in the Father's heart, and I have stories to back the tangible, concrete, beyond the revelation. What good is this revelation if I'm not loving somebody in that revelation? Is I go after people. Now, I want you got to come after me. Okay? I have the same need in this humanity that I walk in, that mutual friendship, mutual relationship, because, yes, Yeshua went and picked out his disciples, but there was also his disciples who came and picked him.
Right.
And so there's that balance there, and which part of that needs to be activated. And so I I go after people when the spirit of Yeshua comes on me, and it's like, okay, they're in my spirit. When I connect with somebody, it's not in the flesh. It's I don't care. At some point, you would hate me, and I will not ever be able to not look at you as my friend. And that's part of our current state. If we would understand and draw out our doctrines, our teachings on healing, on psychology, of a broken soul. You know how much, how many sexually broken men and women are in our culture in America, let alone in the boundaries of the Christianity churches and whatever denomination you're in. It's phenomenal. And how do they need this 12-step program? Well, look at how the Messiah, the Father's heart, on an individual level, ministered. He ran after him when he came into eye contact. Okay? He had to let him go. He didn't go out to the pig pen. There has to be a point where we get to, and I actually, at 7 years old, I think I might have been at that level of vulnerability where, I need out of this. I don't know what this is about. My poor little mind and feeling and body wasn't understanding some things. And when Yeshua appeared to me, he appeared to me on that level. And so when I consider launching a ministry or launching a support group or even doing this, this is a long time, decades waiting for as many stuff that's out there already. Well, I want to do that, Father, but I want to maintain your heart, Father, on that friendship level, and I want to present to you on a story level. Some of the things you're hearing, you've got men who's got sites out there that they did this incredible in-depth study and all that stuff, and it's like, Father, I didn't get to do that, but I got the same result. And I got that result because I'm in a friendship with Yehoshua on an intimate level, and he's teaching me. I don't want to say I can't be taught, but I don't need him to teach me. I want to teach you that. I want to introduce to you an intimacy with the Father so that when I'm sharing with you, or you're sharing with me, you're not being taught by me. I'm sharing with you what the Ruach HaKodesh, what the teachings of Yehoshua have taught me. The Spirit has taught me. I'm passing that on, and I want to hear not what man has taught you. We can tap into all kinds of doctrines. I want to hear, what are you hearing? How can I be an encouragement to you now? Some of the things you're hearing, to go out on your own and say, wow, okay, what are you telling me in what I'm just hearing? The Spirit's teaching somebody right now, not Ron. The things I've learned from Ben, and it's like I would have never been able to balance that out if I don't maintain that mindset and that spirit and that heart. Because the problem still exists today, using the prodigal son story, that we see the progression. He went after him, he kissed him, he hugged him, he clothed him, he restored him back to the family clothes, the ring of the authority. There was no weight. There was no progression of proving. And then he did a celebration. He brought the community in, and we have a clarity. What is it really to be born again? What is it really to be once lost or once dead? I think it's an hour. Once dead and now alive. Once lost and now found. And so in the midst of that, we have the contrast. I got the contrast I needed. I need protected in that state. And my Father, I want the heart of the Father that when a sinner rises up, and whether he was in ministry or coming out of the world or whatever, because remember the prodigal son was part of the kingdom. And when he returns, and how do I protect him? Who protects me? I need protected. Yeah, the Father protects me, yeah, but on a relationship level, we're designed, even Paul had to have another man come and help process and walk out the calling to the Gentiles. He had that incredible encounter. Can you imagine? I can. Sometime maybe you'll hear that story. But the reality is that even then, Paul was instructed to go to a true prophet, to go to a true man who had such intimacy with the Father that the conversation that Ananias is having, you know who he is? He's talking to Jehovah. He's hearing in his own little prayer closet, in his little, guess what? I need you to go, scales, and we know the story. Go there and read it and then ponder it in that mindset of friendship, that mindset of intimacy with the Father. He had an intimate relationship in the spirit of prophecy, which is the testimony of Yehoshua, that he could hear that clear to go after Saul, who became Paul, or Peter and Cornelius. What I'm talking about, they were walking. This is my example. This is my, and even on a personal level, some of the men that I get to cross paths with, you being one of them, and how we cross and the friendship. That spirit of friendship, without even thinking about it, to be able to have the conversations and get through some of the things and the adjustments we both have made in that. And the prodigal son story. I say prodigal son story because most people, everybody on any level of religion or faith knows what I'm talking about. But I want to encourage us to think of it as the story of the Father's heart.
Amen. For
two sons.
Yeah.
And it's always about two sons. And the son that he had to go out into the field didn't know who the Father was any more than the prodigal son who went out in the world. And that's where I think we need challenged in the state of relationship and intimacy. Because just because the son stayed home, working the land, doing everything right, and the law and all that stuff, he still did not know his Father as a father.
Right. I think that what you're saying here is really incredibly important, because we live in a time where, because we've made feelings, and I mean, it's getting to the point where you can break the law because you make somebody feel something. Yeah. I'm talking about the law of the land, where there's consequences. People getting fired, people getting even incarcerated because you make somebody feel something. I understand there's a lot of issues there about safety and civil society and stuff like that. But what it's a sign of, though, is, and what we should see as well, is that how we're relating to each other. If it's about feelings, then me as the brother that stayed behind in the field, the religious person, can look at the nasty sinner that came back and be like, well, if he comes back at all, he should be at a lower level, because he really did this thing. Right. And he needs to work his way back into the graces. And can we really trust him? I mean, he might get his hand in the money box and do it again, and it isn't necessarily that on a human level any of that is wrong and unwise. The problem with it isn't necessarily the Father's heart.
Most of the time, it's safe to say it's not.
Right.
And for me, that's my gauge.
Yeah. The gauge is the Father's heart, and the Father's like, son, you have a double portion. So the one in the field, son, you have a double portion. You're with me always. Shouldn't you know me by now and see what I'm doing? See what we're doing here? See what the work really is?
It's the reality, and this is my gauge for me personally, and how I judge people. Now, that just triggered a bunch of stuff for people, because there is a righteous judgment we're supposed to make, not condemn, but a righteous discernment. My righteous discernment is based on my relationship with Jehovah through Yahushua, and what I've now learned to call Torah, which covers instructions and teachings and doctrines and all that stuff. And the eldest son couldn't even go in and ask his father, "What's going on, Dad?" He had to go to another slave. He had to go to another co-worker. And it was in that there's still a pursuing the father's heart had to do. When is the timing of that pursuit? Well, his eldest son, obviously, he got wind, well, my son's not coming in. He's talking to them. And so he's become conscious of something. And so he went out, and there's where the defense, learning how to defend somebody comes in. That's where I wrestle with these doctrines, these thinkings that I'm contending with sin consciousness versus righteous consciousness. I have people, "Oh, you think you're better than me. You're saying you're right." I am righteous. I was a sinner that I confessed my transgressions against Jehovah's laws, and I have specific ones. It's not, "You were born in sin." It says, no. I have to repent of a transgression against a commandment, whether it was ignorant or willful.
Yeah, but the thing here is, when where the offense comes from is people, when they say, "Oh, well, you're saying you're righteous," they're looking at it from a human standpoint. They're saying, "Oh, well, we're all sinners and nobody should say that they're not because we all struggle," and stuff like that. But what you're trying to look for is from the Father's heart. The Father didn't look at either of the sons as a sinner. He looked at him as, "You're going to be my righteous son." And that, I tell you, I've discovered that changes what you do in the relationship. It doesn't matter if you're talking about your child, your wife, your neighbor, your ministry coworker, whatever it is, whoever you're in relationship with. If you think about they're a sinner and I'm a sinner, your behavior is different than if you say the Lord sees them as righteous because of Yehoshua and what Yehoshua does. He sees them as righteous, and he intends and has the ability to make them righteous.
Yes. And I can give you a relational experience of that. It's just popping into my spirit. I usually, when I meet, especially believers, I can sense, I have to be careful when I use that word, I can discern, I need to speak on them and refer to them. I say, "Hey, my righteous brother." They don't feel righteous. They're still in sin conscious. They may even be cycling through something that's actually literally transgression against Jehovah's laws. Or they may feel like they're a sinner because the religious system says what you just did is sin. Well, show me where the Torah says that's sin. And so the point is, the battle and the rage comes is like, what are you calling me righteous for? Because they're in that doctrine mindset that we're always going to be a sinner, even when we embrace the friendship of Yahushua.
Right, and it's
help me with that.
Well, there's doctrine, right, but the doctrine sometimes is closed on shame.
Yes, right? I appreciate that.
When I met you, if you call me a righteous man, what would rise up in me is, if I'm so righteous, why do I have the results in my life that I have? And that's not because I have a lot of results in my life where I've been obedient to God that are exactly what he wants, but I have shame because I don't compare to other people at the level that I think I should. Right? And so then if you call me righteous, well, if I'm so righteous, how come I have these results? And the interesting thing is, Jesus had humility that didn't come from sin consciousness. And do we want a humility? It's not actually humility, but do we want well, I'm actually saying there's something that's like a humility that is actually a shame that we carry.
Right, and that's called there's humility, humbleness, and then there's, I think, the word arrogance. I did a word study a long time ago, and so it's kind of memory.
Well, I think you're onto something, because
you are too.
Arrogance and worthlessness are two sides of the same thing.
Yes.
Because you feel deep down on a spiritual level, I'll say spiritual, could be a soul level too, but a spiritual level, you feel deep down worthless, then you have to inflate yourself into something you're not. You have to make yourself into a god.
And when we stay sin conscious, and we use that to stay humble, And that's part of the conflict I contend with sometimes, because I will not tell anyone that I'm a sinner anymore. If I'm going to claim my relationship and redemption with Yeshua, I'm not saying
I've heard you say that you think you sinned in a particular matter or a particular incident. You'll say, well, I think I sinned there. So, but you don't identify as a sinner.
I don't.
And you say, as soon as you say, I think maybe I sinned, I've seen you go to Father, and because you're a righteous son, knowing he makes you righteous just because you're turning to him.
Right. See, I've learned, and this is a controversy, Paul, without using Paul's name in vain, righteousness is according to some of the writings in the Bret Hart Shaw, even
what is that?
The New Testament, and some of the writings and different identity markers of men, like Abraham, was counted as righteous. It is in obedience to the instructions. So
now, when you say instructions, which you said several times,
I use the word.
What you mean is basically everything that pertains to God's will.
Yeah, but even that, even the general thing, when regarding to a law or command or instructions, we should always be able to, before I step out and determine whether I've sinned or not, I want it in the context of the definition of what Bible sin is, and it's in the context of principles and precepts, statutes, laws that magnify the nature of Jehovah.
And so you would say that the Sermon on the Mount, for example, that Yehoshua gave the Sermon on the Mount, that would be included.
Maybe. You referenced the Sermon on the Mount, and there's certain stuff in there I can't connect with.
But when he says, for instance, when he says not to look after a woman to lust after her.
Yeah.
But you see that, and you see it as an illumination of what?
I don't know how to answer that.
All right, I'm not trying to stun you.
I've
heard you talk about it before. What I'm trying to get to is stuff I've heard you talk about, where so a lot of times, if you speak Hebrew words and you use Hebrew names and you talk about Torah and instructions, there's evangelical defense against that that rises up that says, well, we've left all that behind.
Yeah, I think I hear what you're referencing. I kind of got a little sidetracked there. What I understand in the canonized Bible that we read as our baseline for faith is that, right, according to the definition, righteousness is doing right.
Yeah.
no, that's still too vague for me.
Okay, we'll get it more specific,
because
but I will. I actually I like the obviousness of that.
It's not those who know the Torah. It's not those who know the law. It's not those who have see it. It's those who do it that are righteousness. So there's the action part of my faith walk in my redemption that makes me righteous. I don't, at this stage in my journey, Yeshua doesn't make me righteous. He cleanses me from my unrighteousness and shows me, here, now go and sin no more. Now go and do these deeds that make you righteous, because these deeds are my Father's deeds. John 3:16 through 21 is a baseline for me. Come into the light. And there are those who won't come into the light because their deeds will be exposed that they're not from Jehovah. That's what he contended with Judaism back then. What's it called, Judaism back then? But with the Talmud that's still carried out, that they believed it had more power and authority than the Torah itself. And that was the point. Is my righteousness based on faith alone? And for me, I can't say yes anymore. Because the devils have the same faith I do, and who the Messiah is, even in his death and resurrection. So my question for me, and how I walked to that, even on a friendship level, because the prodigal son's brother was walking in the worst self-righteousness that we can walk in, even as a believer who's been cleansed and brought back into obedience and a grace to walk, to keep the Sabbath, to wear the tzitzis, to honor the food laws in a way, and the moon cycles and stuff that we're not supposed to be judged by. I can do that without being born again, without that, and that's what the son Judah was doing when Ephraim came home during that prodigal son story. And so the only way that I can shift, even as a man who's been getting it right all my life, I'm not, but those who have to shift into that father's heart mindset, and the motive behind keeping all that can't be a servant-master relationship. That's my gauge. When a man comes to me and we're having these conversations and they're so sin conscious, they don't know the same father I do. They're viewing him in a spirit of fear. That's what we talked about yesterday. And so how can I, in my story, communicate with, I'm a righteous man now. A righteous man falls. And the only way I can get up again is in righteousness. Because the purpose of the law is to reveal the sin. Like when Paul, I think it's Paul, when it's written, I wouldn't have known I was coveting unless it said, thou shalt not covet. Would I have known that I was lusting after a woman wrongly if I didn't know that it says don't lust, don't desire another man's wife in a perverted, intimate, sexual way, or however that is looked at? But the purpose of the revealing of that law tells me I'm under that law, and Yehoshua comes along and says, get out from under it.
Yeah.
Okay, and so
like how can you elevate your
to where I'm no longer coveting? So
right.
I can't
and
do that
also
without being righteous.
You're seeing her, one, as a daughter of this father. Number two, you're seeing her as the blessing in a brother's life. Mm-hmm. So it's a come up and see up here.
It's in the context of the first two commandments for which the prophets and the law are fulfilled.
Right. Fulfilling
meaning walking out. Fulfilling meaning upholding.
Not like in an abstract way dreaming about it.
Yeah.
Like,
or thinking
I love God with all my heart, and I love my neighbor as myself because that's a nice idea.
Or a nice feeling.
Or a nice feeling.
But there's no evidence of that if we're not applying those attributes that identify what our Father's love is for us, for ourselves. The Good Samaritan is just such a powerful example. He was walking out the first two commandments.
Well, I think that we probably ought to wrap this because we could go a long way. But
what
I want to say is that, Ron, I feel grateful that you invited me into this project. I feel like we sat like kind of in the Good Samaritan. We connected to each other instead of walking on by.
Right.
And I'm really grateful, and we had fun putting together this video and starting your channel. So I just want to say God bless you.
Thank you, and likewise. I mean, let's on a friendship level. And this is going to be my baseline for a while. I'm going to milk this until there's nothing left. Is that it helps me distinguish between flattery,
right,
and giving honor where honor's due. On a friendship level, I can honor people. I'm not a good flatterer, so if you're expecting flattery, you're going to be disappointed. But
oh man, well,
I want to do the same.
I'll be okay.
I want to acknowledge the incredible supernatural, I don't like that word, the obedience that we had when we crossed each other's path to go after a friendship, to go after a relationship that not necessarily is easy. We live in different states. Okay? Our hearts are the same for seeking the kingdom, but how we are to find it is going to look different. And so that's what we're after. So I appreciate, this guy. I've always waited for decades. I knew Jehovah. My father was saying, Ron, I want to hook you up with relational on a real relationship level before you launch this. I had opportunities in the past. So, okay, but I needed this kind of support, not just the tech support. Well, yeah, the tech support, but on a relationship level. So I appreciate your heart.
Yeah, we hung out for several days getting ready to make this video, just doing what you're talking about.
And I want, as we launch this, I hope people can get through the length of time this video is. I'll try to commit to.
You can make shorter ones, but this is historical. This is historical, right?
But this is the video I'm going to want people to go to get a perspective, a perception, even a sense of what do you want from friendship with Jehovah or with Yehoshua. Because without that, for me personally, my redemption, my confession of, I know Jesus, or I know Yehoshua, remember how many went, Lord, Lord, look at what I done, I think I know you. But Yeshua turns to them, I don't know you, who are you?
Yeah, because he didn't see the friendship in them.
There was not that intimate, relational, where they could receive the teachings of the Father. So the deeds that they were doing were in the boundaries of the Torah. And just keep in mind, the Torah is a scary word for a lot of people, even the Hebrew roots people and the Messianic. But the word Torah encompasses everything that represents teaching, everything that represents principles and precepts and statutes and oh my. And so...
Well, but what makes it not scary for me, and I like it that we have this conversation a lot because I need it a lot. What makes it not scary for me is Father, right? And you began this whole video, and I think we should end this whole video on the idea of Father and friend, not Lord and Master, not a cosmic being so far that doesn't want to be. Because I have precepts, I have principles that I want to pass on to my children, and as a father, that's not a crushing, destroying, alienating thing. When my kids rely on the principles and precepts of relationship I carry, even to have fun playing. And when I come home, they want to come and play with Dad because Dad is the best playmate. And that's how we should feel about the Father. And as much as it isn't necessarily all about like law and the fulfillment of law. Like when we get into that language, sometimes we forget that it is this idea of a character that allows joy, a character that allows pleasure, a character that allows blessing. That's the root of it. So thanks, Ron, for this father's heart, really focusing on it.
I appreciate that. I've been waiting for decades for this. I want to release Jehovah's blessing for obeying and the relationship part of it, some of the things that we shared and the increase that you need as you do what you're doing here at Deer Park and what Jehovah's put in your vision and your heart, and as we continue to understand how does our gifts, I'm going to say it this way, your heart is very apostolic. Is it fair to say that?
Sure.
And mine is very prophetic. And I say that because one of my desires is to see the true prophetic of Jehovah, the spirit of prophecy, the testimony of Yeshua restored in the hour that we're in. Because Jehovah will not do anything without first going through who? His servants, the prophets. And my approach now is through Yeshua, who is the prophet of all prophets, the identity marker, the relational marker, that it's through that intimate friendship, intimate encounter with the Messiah that will allow me to serve now, not in fear, but in joy, in love, obeying the instructions of the Master. You do it out of fear. And obeying the instructions of the Father, you do it out of love. I can't love my Father in heaven if I don't know what His instructions are, and I need to obey Him doing that, and I need to walk in that. So I appreciate this, man. Thank you so much. I know we talked about a lot. I think pray. Those who know what I mean when I say pray for me, Paul said pray that I can open my mouth and say the right things, because this launch is going to open up a energy level to give me I'll use it lightly, a platform to put out some stories, to put out some relational revelations, and at times maybe here's some passages that I use. This is my gauge. You hear me talk about scripture like I'm doing John 15:15? That's not a teaching. I hope you don't hear that as a teaching. The prodigal son, that's not a teaching. That's my gauge. That's my platform for which I defined my heart, and define my relationship to Yeshua, define my relationship to Jehovah, and define my relationship to you. So I want to end on that. Let me get this right. Because
you got it right. I hear you.
The vertical,
right,
is how we're to live. And yeah, that's common for me. The vertical is how we live. The horizontal is where we live.
Right, exactly.
Okay, and I want to stop having this and then having to go like this to relate to the horizontal. And I have enough stories to know I'm like this, and I'm going to travel along the horizontal. It's horizontal, right?
Yep, you're going to walk upright. You're going to be righteous.
And that analogy just spoke. Ben gave this to me. This is the power of this incredible insight that on this level that he has, that it ministers to me. It goes way over my head. So I need these little hand gestures, you know. Here, little boy, here. But anyway, I'm doing that. But as soon as I find myself wanting to relate on an emotional level, it doesn't last very long. Right. And as long as we learn how to maintain that, and even like, put your hand up, Ben, like mine has. We're all on the same plane. So on this plane, Ben and I are walking this way together.
Right.
All right. And that's when we have our most deepest relational encounters with each other, where we stay in unity. We're staying in unity this way because we're connected to the same Father, the same mind, the same heart, but we're living it out on this plane.
This is the real unity. The one here, this unity does not last.
It doesn't.
And it always involves compromise, but this is the true
unity. It is. And when Yeshua, on an intimate way, said, I didn't come to bring unity. I came to bring division. What was that division he came to bring? He came to separate us from our mind's understanding to the heavenly's understanding, and give us an expectation that we can walk in the kingdom of heaven, in the reign of heaven, and righteousness. My encouragement to us as we pursue and work out our salvation, work out our relationship with fear and trembling, that we include righteousness in our gospel, good news, relational messages. Thank you.
Amen.